Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. The email wasn't flagged. No red marks, no exclamation signs. Just a plain message tucked between spam and a calendar reminder about a systems update. Final stage clearance. Discrepancy in academic credential. He'd seen a lot of internal checks. Names mismatched, birth dates scrambled, foreign degrees caught in verification limbo. This one wasn't that. This was silence dressed as certainty. His hands paused over the keyboard. The timestamp on the clearance form said 2:17 a.m., processed out of an office in Bethesda, yet the university in question wasn't there. No record of Camden. Not in the National Student Clearinghouse. Not in archived accreditation boards. Not in Google's endless sprawl. He searched deeper. State registries, digital libraries, alumni networks, satellite map. He tried looking up professors, departments, archived course syllabi. Nothing. A numb pressure settled between his ribs. His degree had never been questioned. 4 years of coursework. Capstone project. The long walk on a wet lawn with a black robe sticking to the back of his knees. His father had flown in from Houston, miserable in the humidity, and cried quietly during the speech about pursuit and purpose. He remembered the bookstore, the rough carpet and plastic nameplates. He remembered the philosophy class held in the attic of an old chapel that reeked of varnish and mothballs. The windows there always stuck. The institution was gone. Not missing, gone. No alumni photos, no donor lists, no scanned diplomas floating on graduation blogs. Even the .edu domain, expired, abandoned, redirected to a placeholder server in Taiwan. A listless wave passed through his chest. He pulled up his old resume from a folder labeled archive_internal, opened the PDF, and stared at the line that named the school. Camden University. Class of 2004. A quick call to HR turned up nothing but scripted confusion. The woman on the other end said his file had been flagged by the verification contractor. Said she'd never heard of Camden. Said she'd check again. He sat in the dark, screen glowing, the sound of the refrigerator 2 rooms away like someone pacing too slowly. He called an old colleague from his first job out of college. She answered on the second ring, her voice slow with sleep. Yeah, she remembered the university. Said she once dated someone from their architecture department. Said they had great coffee at the on-campus cafe with the stone step. But when he asked her if she could find her diploma, she went quiet. The line clicked. He checked social media. Searched groups. Hashtags. Niche forums. One post on a forgotten discussion board caught his eye. Camden alums. Why can't I find our school anymore? No replies. The fridge stopped humming. The silence changed. He stood, unsure why, and walked to the hallway mirror. Not to check his reflection. Not really. Just to see if his eyes still looked like they remembered. Something about the way the hall light hit the floor looked wrong. A small thought took root. Not fear. Not yet. He opened a drawer and dug out the box of old paperwork from storage. Tax returns. Insurance forms. The lease from an apartment near Bellbridge. A brochure for Camden's Fall Orientation 2000. Except it wasn't there. An hour passed. Maybe more. He emptied the box. Pried up the cardboard folds. Nothing. The bottom of the drawer felt warm. He took a photo of his resume. Sent it to a former classmate. No context. Just the image. The reply came 5 minutes later. I remember Camden. But I can't prove it. A second message followed. Do you? The first call was answered with laughter. Not mocking, not dismissive. Just the sound of someone who hadn't been forced to question what they thought they knew. She said of course she remembered. East dorm, 4th floor, the water pipes that hissed when the showers ran too long. She asked if he still had that corduroy jacket he wore every winter, the one with the torn cuff and the inside pocket full of lint and receipt. The voice faltered when asked about proof. A long pause. Then a nervous joke about dusty boxes and storage units, and how maybe it was time to organize. More names followed. Old roommates, study partners, the guy who played saxophone on the quad on Saturdays. Every call carried the same pattern: recognition, warmth, and the strange silence when asked for records. No one had yearbooks. No one had digital copies of coursework. No one could find even one photo. The silence spread like water under wallpaper. A group chat formed, patched together from old contact lists and half-remembered emails. 9 people at first, then 13. The messages came fast at first, full of energy, filled with the kind of detailed memories that shouldn't exist unless they were true. The scent of varnish in the student lounge. The ivy-covered arch near the anthropology building. The sound the main gate made when it swung shut in winter. Someone recalled a professor who taught phenomenology with chalk that squeaked only when he quoted Husserl. Someone else remembered a blackout that lasted 2 days, how students lit candles in the stairwells and the gym became a temporary shelter. There were no arguments. The details aligned. Too many of them. A woman from that chat went quiet for hours. When she returned, she wrote that she had found her old laptop. The silver one with the cracked hinge and the faded sticker of a howling coyote. It had been stored in a bin in her attic, beneath a box of outdated holiday ornaments and moth-eaten scarves. She said it turned on. Said she opened the documents folder, scrolled through the names of files she hadn't touched in 15 years. Essay draft. Lecture recordings. Photos of a spring carnival, a protest outside the admin hall, a flyer for an underground poetry reading hosted in a basement. Every file opened to a white screen. No text. No error message. Just blank, as if overwritten by silence. The laptop shut off on its own. She tried again. The device refused to respond. Another classmate posted a video. Short, shaky footage of what looked like dorm windows, dimly lit, strung with faded lights. The file glitched after 5 seconds. Froze on a frame showing someone seated at a desk, back turned to the camera. Nobody could say who the person was. Someone else tried calling the phone number listed for Camden's old admissions office. A dial tone, followed by static. Then an automated message in a mechanical voice. This number is no longer in service. The next message in the group chat came from a man who used to manage sound for the campus radio station. He remembered the code to the broadcast booth. Remembered the wall of cassette tapes, the dent in the console where someone threw a mug during a breakup. He typed slowly, said he still had his old student ID card. He attached a photo. It showed a blank white rectangle. Smooth plastic. No name. No photo. No barcode. The group chat quieted after that. One by one, profile pictures turned gray. Not disappeared. Just dulled. As if recognition were softening in real time. A final message came through from someone who hadn't spoken yet. We need to go back. I need to see the field for myself. No one replied. But the screen stayed open. The drive to Bellbridge passed in quiet stretches. No radio, no idle talk. Just the sound of tires tracing faded asphalt and the occasional groan of wind against the windshield. Patches of mist clung to the trees like they weren't ready to let go of something. The road signs grew less frequent. The trees thicker. Cell reception faded to nothing. The town emerged without announcement. A gas station with no name. A laundromat that hadn't changed its window display in years. A diner with 2 occupied booths and a waitress whose smile stopped just short of her eyes. She said she'd lived in Bellbridge her whole life. Said she'd never heard of a university nearby. Not once. Not ever. No one in the diner had. Not the man with the grease-stained cap. Not the woman sorting mail behind the counter. No one recalled students, or dorms, or traffic spikes in the fall. Someone laughed and said this wasn't a college town. Never had been. Outside, the road curved north into the woods. No signposts. No directional arrows. Just a narrowing 2-lane track flanked by dying oaks and whispering pine. It ended at a chain-link fence wrapped in government placard. EPA Hazardous Zone. Site 17F. No trespassing. Authorized personnel only. The metal gates were locked. The fence rusted and doubled in height with barbed wire. Inside the perimeter stood open land. Flat. Treeless. Grass that looked trimmed, but not cultivated. No buildings. No foundations. Just a square of green that didn't quite belong. No birds. The field made no sound. They walked the perimeter, fingers trailing along metal links. 20 minutes to circle the whole thing. No camera poles. No signs of recent vehicle tracks. No discarded construction material. Just soil that didn't match the color of anything else nearby. One of them crouched to inspect the grass near the fence base. Said the soil felt too soft. Pressed a palm to it. Said it was warm. Not sun-warmed. Heat without source. They found a small concrete post buried near the eastern corner. Faded letters chiseled into the side. CUNV. The wind rose. The gate didn't move. The air pressed heavier the longer they stood. Like a weight was deciding whether or not to announce itself. Across the road, a farmhouse sat half-collapsed, shingles peeling, windows boarded. A man stepped out from behind the screen door. He said nothing for a long time. Just stared. When asked about the university, he shook his head. Said there was never a school here. Just forest and deer and the EPA boys who came through a decade back to deal with something underground. Couldn't remember what. He looked at their faces, paused, and asked if they were from that reunion group that came through a few years ago. No one answered. He nodded like he expected that. Said the field had always been quiet. Said it gave his dog seizures. Said his daughter used to walk across it as a shortcut to town, until she came home one day crying, saying the ground whispered names she couldn't forget. He laughed after that. Said he probably imagined it. Told them not to stick around after dark. As they turned to leave, one of them pulled out a Polaroid. Not from Camden. Just an old photo, a street corner in Brooklyn, nothing special. They aimed it toward the fence. Click. Let the photo develop in their hand. The grass in the image looked scorched. Their fingers trembled as they tucked it away. No one spoke for the rest of the day. The diner owner gave them a name. Said he used to clean buildings out near Site 17F before the signs went up. Lived in a trailer park by the river, near the rusted bridge where kids used to throw stones through the gap. The trailer sat on cinder blocks, its awning bowed and stained from a roof that hadn't been checked in years. He answered without hesitation. Said yes, there had been something there. A school maybe. Couldn't remember if it was public or private. Knew there were young people, lots of them. Music on weekends, traffic on weekdays, lights that never stayed out during storms. His hands shook when he lit his cigarette. Not from age. From something else. He described buildings made of red stone. Said the walls were always cold, even in summer. Mentioned the bell. Said it rang too early in the morning, always 5 minutes off from the hour. When asked what happened, his gaze drifted. Something went wrong, he said. Shrugged. Tried to remember. Used words that didn't belong together. A phrase about flooding that came without rain. A mention of machines in the ground that never made sound but made everything feel too loud. He said the demolition was fast. No notices. No salvage crews. Just men in gray trucks, followed by weeks of quiet. His voice cracked when he tried to name the year. It stopped halfway through, like the number was a hill too steep. He wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, stood up, walked to the fridge, stared inside without pulling anything out. He said he forgot what he was looking for. They left without pressing. Back at the motel, one of them unpacked a box that had been gathering dust since 2006. It was taped in layers, the cardboard soft and flaking at the edges. Inside, a stack of cassette tapes sat wrapped in a torn Camden University hoodie. One tape bore a label written in fading blue ink. Camden Radio, late hours mix. The handwriting was familiar. They found a player in a thrift shop 2 towns over. A gray rectangle with cracked buttons and a speaker that rattled when shaken. They rewound the tape, pressed play, waded through the static. A slow bass line emerged. Faint. Hollow. Then a voice. Soft. Casual. Unmistakable. She used to host the midnight segment, played records that never quite fit any genre, spoke like she wasn't sure anyone was listening but didn't mind either way. The voice said, "That was a request from Malcolm in South Dorm." Next up, something a little weird. The next sound was a sharp pop. The music warped. The voice came back, but slower. Elongated. Something a little weird. The tape hissed. The speaker pulsed once with a high-pitched tone, sharp enough to make someone cover their ears. They stopped the tape. Rewound. Played again. The same moment distorted. The same words stretched into noise. Tried fast-forwarding. The tape whined. A clicking noise repeated under the audio, like a chair rocking unevenly on tile. They tried again. The speaker rattled louder. The voice returned, but something had changed. "Don't answer." The rest dissolved into static. They removed the tape. Held it in silence. No one asked what it meant. One of them reached for the hoodie. Turned it over. On the inside of the hood, written in faint ink near the seam, "I remember you. Do you remember me?" No one slept that night. She stopped answering messages 3 days after the mixtape. The read receipts came in, but no replies followed. At first, it felt like withdrawal. Everyone had needed air at some point. There were long silences in the group before, always followed by uneasy laughter or a late-night message full of questions no one could answer. This was different. Her profile photo disappeared. The chat marked her number as unregistered. Someone called her office. A man picked up. Said no one by that name worked there. Said he'd been at the company 6 years and never heard of her. When asked again, his tone shifted. Said the department didn't exist. A few hours later, an envelope arrived. No return address. A smudged postmark from somewhere in Illinois. Inside was a set of photocopies. 9 pages. Black and white. Creased from folding. The top page bore a title in all caps. Localized Temporal Displacement and Consensus Fabrication. The first line read, "This paper examines the malleability of shared chronology when subjected to isolated distortions in time-referenced environment." The rest blurred into equations, diagrams, blocks of dense text. Not theoretical musings, but a formal thesis, structured, cited. Someone had spent months writing it. Margins were marked in red pen. Notes that read like arguments between versions of the same thought. One note underlined a sentence and read, "If memory is elastic, what anchors it?" Another page was scorched across the bottom. The burn had eaten through part of a paragraph that ended with the phrase, "Identities cannot outlive erasure unless reinforced by multiplicity." On the 6th page, 3 words were underlined in ink darker than the rest. Constructed, recursive, decaying. A photo had been slipped between the last 2 pages. Grainy. Cropped. A woman standing in front of a brick wall. Eyes downcast, one hand raised mid-sentence. A blackboard behind her bore the words Behavioral Temporal Studies, Maris. Her face was familiar in a way that made the stomach tense. Beneath the photo, someone had written in pencil, "This was real. You were there." No one could remember the moment. Later that night, someone tried calling her number again. The line rang once, then cut to silence. Not voicemail. Not a tone. Just nothing. A search turned up no digital record. No tax history. No social accounts. No voting registration. The phone buzzed once with a group message. She said her brother stopped recognizing her. Said she couldn't remember her own handwriting. Said she tried to write the name Camden over and over and it looked wrong each time. That was the last message received from her number. The following morning, one of them stared at the envelope's postmark. Ran their finger along the ridges of the paper. Folded it again. Set it on the table, and watched the light catch the burned edge. No one opened the package again. She approached at the edge of the parking lot, where the wind carried dust in short, uncommitted bursts and the sun hung lower than it should have for the hour. Said she overheard someone at the county archive asking about Camden. Said it had been a long time since she heard that name aloud. She didn't introduce herself. Just held out a photograph. A boy in his early 20s stood in front of a stone staircase. One hand rested on the shoulder strap of a worn backpack. The corner of his mouth bent toward a grin but didn't reach it. Someone had written a name on the back in red ink, now blurred with moisture. She said he was her brother. Psychology major. 2 years into his degree when the calls stopped. She said she drove up to the campus the following weekend, couldn't get past the outer road. Military vehicles blocked the entrance. No explanation, no warning. Said she filed a missing person report. Was told there was no such student registered at any school by that name. She said the house was emptied months later. No clothes in the closet. No journals. No notes. Except for one thing. She pulled a thin book from her bag, bound in cracked leather, the spine stitched unevenly. A journal. She said she found it in the attic, sealed inside a manila envelope beneath a box of Halloween decorations. No name on the cover. No indication it was his, aside from the way the handwriting matched birthday cards he'd written in junior high. The entries started normal. Class schedules. Notes on readings. Observations from study sessions. The tone shifted mid-page, somewhere near the back. Sentences grew shorter. Days skipped. Repetitions began. One paragraph had been scratched over until the paper tore, but enough remained to catch the phrase, "If memory resets but context remains, does awareness follow?" The final entry filled half a page. The words were sharper, darker. Today we looped again. I felt it halfway through the lecture. Maris paused mid-sentence and asked if we were feeling the lag. Some students nodded. One stood up and walked out. He didn't come back. Nobody asked where he went. Maris marked his name with a pencil. I watched him draw a circle around it. I asked him what that meant. He smiled and said, "It's better not to anchor too hard. Things can't stay where they've already been." Below that, a single line in different handwriting. "This entry does not belong here." She said she didn't know what the loop meant. Said she didn't want to know. She looked past him toward the road as though something might arrive. Something overdue. Said she hadn't dreamed in years. Told him to keep the journal. Said she wouldn't read it again. He asked about the professor. She paused before answering. Said the name sounded familiar. Said it pressed against the edge of her teeth. Maris. Said it felt like a name spoken through glass. Then she left without another word. The sun dipped lower. The parking lot emptied. He opened the journal again. Traced the line with his finger. "This entry does not belong here." The ink had dried unevenly, as if the page itself resisted holding it. The receptionist wore a pin shaped like a sunflower. She typed slowly, eyes flicking between the screen and the wall clock. Said he was awake some days. Said the better time to catch him was just before lunch. Said she wasn't sure how much he'd remember. The care home smelled like linoleum and peeled fruit. Faint hum of televisions behind closed doors. Every hallway identical except for the paintings. Cheap prints of seascapes nailed in crooked rows. He sat by the window in a room that faced nothing. No garden, no courtyard. Just a cinderblock wall and a patch of sky shaped by utility wires. He didn't look up when the name was spoken. But something changed in his grip on the blanket. Not a startle. Not fear. A contraction, like remembering had weight. He whispered once. "Camden." Asked who was asking. Asked who let that name in. His eyes stayed fixed on the window, but his breath shifted. Said it was supposed to be closed. Said it was never going to be perfect, but someone signed off anyway. He mumbled about the lab in the East Building. Not the science hall, the one beneath it. A floor not listed on blueprints. Said they were warned. Not by letters or lawyers. Not threats or protests. Something else. Whispers from students who couldn't remember enrolling. Patterns in the clock tower chimes that never repeated. He said a girl came into his office once asking to withdraw mid-semester. Said she looked wrong. Said her file showed she'd never been admitted. Said he asked for her name and she smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if I'm going to be unmade anyway." His voice cracked on the word unmade. He fell silent after that. Minutes passed. He asked what year it was. Tried again. Asked who was president. Asked where his wife went. Said he used to be someone important. Said the letters after his name made him feel like he could touch things and they would last. He blinked once, slowly. Said Camden ran something it shouldn't have. Said memory was the cost. That was all. The nurse came in just after the clock hit noon. Said it was time for medication. Said he needed rest. 4 hours later, the phone call came. Cardiac arrest. No suffering. By the time anyone arrived, the room was clean. No photos. No papers. No framed awards. No name on the door. The sunflower pin was gone. He said he'd found them in a forgotten state archive, sandwiched between floor plans for a shopping mall that was never built and a land use application dated 1963. Thin, oversized sheets curled at the corners, labeled in fading pencil. Campus schematics, building names, sublevels marked with strange annotations. A corridor labeled only as Red South. He sent a photo of the main layout to the group chat. There was no caption. No explanation. Just the image. 2 minutes later, the message disappeared. The photo gone. Reactions wiped. The thread showed no trace of the upload. His name still appeared at the top of the chat, but every message he'd sent over the past 2 weeks now read, "This message has been removed." No one had deleted them. No one knew how. An hour passed. Someone tried to call. The line rang once, disconnected. His number came back as unassigned. His profile photo vanished. A search for his username returned nothing. His email bounced. No post. No comment. No digital residue. One of them opened an old Dropbox folder they used to share photos from reunions. His album had vanished. The folder still showed the original count, 42 files, but when opened, only 39 appeared. The space between them widened. The group chat slowed. Questions went unanswered. Daniel began writing things down. Not typing. Not recording. Just pen and paper. Date. Times. Names. Pieces of conversations. Outlines of events already starting to fade around the edges. He kept a small notebook in his coat pocket. Rewrote entries nightly. Cross-checked his own handwriting. He dated every page, underlined any sentence that felt wrong, boxed anything that made his stomach shift. On the 5th day, he caught himself staring at a note that said, "We visited Camden's site on April 4th. He remembered the drive, the gate, the field, the scorched photo, but the name Camden on the page looked unfamiliar. Not wrong, not foreign, just less certain. Like reading a dream someone else had. He flipped to earlier pages. The word had changed there too. The letters curved differently. He turned to a blank page and wrote it fresh, slowly, letting the pen drag. Camden. It still felt wrong. He went back to the group chat. Typed a message. Does anyone else feel like we're forgetting why this matters? 4 minutes passed. One reply. Forget what? He scrolled up. A week's worth of conversation had vanished. He checked his phone's storage. The file size of the chat app had dropped. Half what it was 3 days ago. Another message arrived. Who is Victor? He closed the app. Set the phone face down. Opened the notebook again. Underlined Camden twice. Pressed his thumb against the ink. It smeared. He stared at the blur for a long time, waiting for it to mean something. He waited for the town to sleep. No headlights on the road. No windows lit above the laundromat. The fence at Site 17F hadn't changed. Same warnings, same rusted chain pulled tight through the gate. The padlock snapped clean under the bolt cutters, the sound too loud in the quiet. He didn't bring a flashlight. Just a penlight clipped to his collar. Just enough to see where to place his feet. The field looked flatter than he remembered. Not empty. Not full. Just undecided. The grass bent away from his steps as though shaped by something he couldn't feel. He searched for the post they'd found last time, the one carved with faded letters. He found it covered in moss that hadn't been there before. Cleared it with his sleeve. The markings had deepened. The sea had broken into 2 vertical slashes. He kept walking until he reached the center. The ground shifted beneath his heel. Not soft, not unstable, just wrong. He knelt, brushed away dirt, found metal. A ring bolted flat into a rust-stained surface. Circular plate, bolted shut. He dug with his hands, dirt packed tight around the edges. Took 10 minutes before the shape revealed itself fully. Manhole cover. No markings, no agency label, just a groove at the edge. He pried it loose with a tire iron. The metal screamed, low and drawn. A smell rose from the hole. Not rot, not mold. Something preserved. Ladder rungs descended into dark. He went down without thinking. 16 rungs. No more. His shoes hit concrete. The air felt still but moved against his skin. A tunnel stretched forward. Cinder block walls. Pipes running along the ceiling. Fluorescent bulbs shattered in intervals. Wires exposed. He passed doors with no labels. Some sealed with rusted hinges. One hung open, revealing an empty storage room. Dust formed in patterns that didn't match the airflow. Further down, the shape of the hallway changed. Wider. Tiles appeared underfoot. Familiar ones. Blue and gray in a checker pattern. The kind from the dorm entrance halls. He reached another door. Heavy steel. Painted over. His hand paused at the handle. Graffiti ran across the surface in shaky black lines. "We are real." Letters jagged. Uneven pressure. He pushed the door open. The room stretched wider than it should have. Not a hall, not a storage space. Desks. 2 rows of them. Half broken. Some pushed to the wall. A lectern leaned sideways at the front, its base split. The blackboard remained intact. Dust covered most of it except for the center. Clean. Wiped recently. 3 words written in thick white chalk. "You never left." The penlight dimmed. He stared without blinking. No sound. No breath. No memory of walking to the board. But his hand reached out anyway. Fingers brushed chalk. It smeared. Still fresh. The notebook lay open on the table beside a half-finished cup of black coffee, pages warped from weather, the ink pressed deeper than necessary into the paper. Every word written with a hand that no longer trusted digital permanence. The final entry sat alone on the last page, centered, uncorrected. Camden was real. It was erased. But it's still inside us. No signature followed. No date. No further notes in the margin. Just the sentence, heavy as a closing door. The train pulled into the station with a slow mechanical shudder. Screeching metal dragged through the tunnel. Lights overhead flickered once and steadied. The doors opened. Passengers stepped on without urgency. Shoes clapped against the platform in dull rhythm. He entered last, found a seat near the end of the car, next to the window where reflections pressed faint outlines into the glass. Across from him, someone read from a phone with cracked edges. A teenager half asleep leaned against the pole. A woman folded receipts into tiny triangles and tucked them in her coat pocket. The motion of the train blurred the advertisements into colorless smears. Fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, just above human hearing. Air circulated without coolness. Time passed without register. A man took the empty seat beside him. Not remarkable. Not threatening. Just another presence with tired eyes and a heavy coat. For a long stretch, neither spoke. The train moved through 3 stops. The crowd shifted. The space between bodies thickened and thinned. Footsteps, coughs, the buzz of a low conversation behind them. None of it quite reached the foreground. At the 4th stop, the man beside him turned slightly. Not in greeting. Not in demand. Just enough to ask a question that didn't belong in the present. "Hey, you ever hear of a place called Camden University?" The words did not echo. They did not bounce or replay. They settled like dust on an undisturbed surface. He blinked. Not quickly. Not with confusion. Just once. Deliberate. A muscle remembering its function. His mouth remained still. No answer came. No nod. No shake of the head. The train moved forward. Somewhere behind his eyes, A hallway stretched beyond memory. A door waited without a handle. Chalk dust clung to his fingertip. The air smelled of books that no longer had titles. A voice asked a question he had already heard. He looked straight ahead. The lights did not change. The train did not stop. Nothing around him noticed that something had shifted. But something had. It always had. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.